I don't know how to feel about this season. See, before I rewatched season 3 of Danmachi, my impression of it was pretty negative. I remember getting increasingly annoyed watching each episode, and by the end, reaching to the conclusion that it was pretty trash. But now that I have gotten a refresher and took some notes, I realized that it really wasn't that bad. At least I wasn't screaming at the screen every 2 minutes like I was while rewatching season 2. The bad in this season still annoyed me a lot, but I definitely looked over some of the good in this season the first time I watched it as well. Normally, that would result in an easy conclusion that this season was just pretty mid. But this time, I'm kinda split on whether the bad in this season ruins it for me. At this point, I'm still not sure how I exactly feel about this season as a whole. But that's getting a little bit ahead of myself. Like before, I'm going to dive straight into some major plot points and spoilers for this season, so I highly recommend you go watch the anime before watching. Not only because you'll get spoiled, but more importantly, you might not be able to follow what I'm exactly talking about. And hey, if you got time to spare, why not go check out my previous videos on the first 2 seasons of this anime as well. That way, you'll perhaps understand better why I might be having the opinions I have on this season. Now that that's out of the way, let's begin. To explore the question of whether the bad ruins the good, we'll have to first talk about the good. This season dedicated the entirety of its runtime to a single arc, focusing solely on the story of the Xenos, a group of intelligent monsters. And I think that's quite a smart thing to do, given that this issue isn't one that Bell can solve just by being really strong, beating the bad guys, and heroing all over the place. This is something that first requires him and his companions to seriously think about, given that the existence of the Xenos completely breaks some foundational rules of this world that they live in. As such, this season already has a step up above the last, since due to this devotion to this arc and its comparatively more complex theming, there weren't any filler episodes where nothing happens. Everything in this season was focused on things that are tied to the Xenos, and we more or less keep moving forward with the story with each episode. And obviously, I like that. To elaborate on the theming of this season, I think the Xenos are quite a novel concept. The idea of, what if the monsters we kill also has feelings, definitely isn't new by any stretch. But here, Danmachi asks you, look, what if monsters have feelings, but, let me cook, only some of them do? By throwing that slight curveball on the concept, it already invokes a lot of questions. Exactly how do they differ from normal monsters? If monsters are capable of developing feelings, how should we feel about killing those that haven't yet? If they are the exception instead of the rule, how does that change our perception on monsters as a whole? Should we consider them as monsters in the first place, or a completely different species? The anime answers some of these questions, but some are not so black and white or clear, and does allow for some thinking and discussions to take place. One scene in the first episode does quite well to show off the inherent complexity of the situation. Weene, a monster girl who was just rescued by Bell and brought to the surface, gets to experience luxuries almost no monster could ever have, namely the sunlight and homemade food. Being happy and grateful, Weene goes to cuddle Bell, and just as we think we're in for a dose of moe and cuteness, we're horribly cut off by Weene's sharp claws accidentally slicing open Bell's arm and spilling blood everywhere. We're instantly thrown back into reality, and we realize, even though she is sentient and a total cinnamon roll, she still has the body of a monster. Given her body features, does it mean that she is just meant to do harm? Is that ultimately still her nature as a monster, or can she change that? Would Belle be able to do anything to change that? Is it even worth it to help her if she can inflict harm on humans this easily, even on accident? I think it's quite clever how they completely shift the tone 180 degrees, from cute to bloody in a split second, forcing you to contemplate about those questions through the sheer dichotomy of the two vibes. And whether you have the answers to those questions or not during that scene, I think just making you think about them does quite well to tell you that this might not be quite like the previous adventures Belle goes on. The way they portray this situation with the Xenos is also quite realistic. Given how monsters have only been mindless killing machines to the citizens of this town, they are all understandably not accepting of the Xenos. The show knows it wouldn't be believable at all if they went in the "hero solves major social issue through sheer force of will" route, so they decide to double down on the ignorant, yet reasonable hatred of the people toward the Xenos, which is what would happen if a similar situation happens in the real world, and have our protagonists do their best to help in spite of that. I mean, think about it. Let's say you're in a zombie apocalypse. You have fended off zombies every day at your post for years now. You've seen many other people, or even your loved ones, get killed and eaten by zombies. And that is why you have devoted your life to killing zombies. And one day, this random guy comes up to you and says, "Hey, I have these group of zombies that isn't like other zombies. They're nice and don't want to hurt you. Do you want to take them in?" What would you say? Probably,
No!
you wouldn't believe him for a second. Besides, even if you were slightly persuaded, would you want to take that risk? Probably also no. This extends to our main characters as well. Even though they do end up supporting the Xenos, most of the Hestia Familia was originally quite hesitant as well, showing that they are part of this world. That is especially so with Lily, who is the one contrarian within the Hestia Familia, showing the most discomfort with taking in Wine, and even suggesting at one point that they stop sheltering Wine for the sake of the Familia. And she is completely justified in doing so, given the amount of disdain the Hestia Familia would get if the public caught wind of their actions. Things aren't quite just black and white. This isn't just a battle between the good guys and bad guys. It's a balancing act between doing what they think is right and managing their public image, lest they lose their standing in the town and face a miserable future. It's a genuinely difficult situation, and it's nice to see that they didn't simplify it too much. To further prove that the situation isn't black and white, just look at what the Xenos do in the show. Given that they're sentient, we're shown that they can have differing opinions among themselves about humans, all with good reasoning. And even though this is the quote-unquote faction we're supposed to root for, at one point, driven by anger and vengeance, they go and unleash a whole raid on a human town. At first, I had thought of this as a negative. I said, "Do you really expect us to support the Xenos after they threw away their wishes for peace and attacked the innocent?" But after giving it some thought, it makes perfect sense. I mean, how do you expect the Xenos to feel after hiding in the shadows for so long, specifically to avoid conflict, only to have some assholes kill and kidnap their friends and family unprovoked? Not to mention that this has been going on for a good while now. It doesn't really ruin my attachment to the Xenos like I first thought, but rather just showing how beings with sentience would realistically react to such an unfair situation. Showing that maybe the Xenos and humans aren't so different after all, both rightfully wanting revenge for the crimes done against their people. And in the end, after they are reunited with their people, all of the Xenos decide to go back into hiding anyway. So I would say that ended pretty well. Another thing we get to see here is Bell being in genuine distress. Even though we have seen him needing to overcome some tough situations before, it was always just him needing to build the resolve and strength to beat the overwhelmingly strong bad guy in order to get closer to his goal. But in this season, we see his past beliefs get brutally challenged. It makes him question whether it was even right to disregard the lives of the monsters he's killed, all in the name of fulfilling his ambitions. That leads to him needing to make some painful decisions, such as risking his reputation and life as an adventurer, and to go against the person he looks up to the most. It is in these moments we truly get to see what makes Bell, Bell. And who can say no to character development like that? Speaking of Bell going against Eyes, those scenes also give us some pretty solid and realistic character writing. Bell, despite his immense growth, is still quite the amateur adventurer, so he's able to be a bit flexible in his way of thinking, in particular about the Xenos. But Eyes is a veteran. She's been in the dungeon countless times, no doubt seeing many instances of people getting hurt or killed by monsters in horrific ways. Thus, her logic is simple. If people will be hurt, no. If people will even be made to cry because of monsters, she will kill monsters. Having seen the damage monsters can cause for so long, she doesn't want anyone to even receive any mental harm that they might deal. You can't really blame her for feeling that way, and I can't even say she's strictly in the wrong. But at the same time, you can't say Bell is wrong in what he's doing either. This really allows Bell and Ai's ideologies to clash in a way that makes them shine in a way like never before. Eventually, Ais does get persuaded to let Weene go, but it takes quite a lot for her to be swayed. Specifically, Weene had to rip off her claws and wings that Ais pointed out as being harmful to the people to show her resolve in the pursuit of peace and coexistence. And let me say, props to Weene here, really clap it up for her, that's some badass stuff. It's also the only thing she does, but we'll get into that later. Lastly, shoutouts to the final fight of the season. The fight itself was quite badass, with pretty good purposeful movements in the animation, and god damn those sound effects! But the thematic parts of the fight were also really nice. Since this big black minotaur called Asterius is actually the minotaur Bell fought in Season 1, Reborn, it's not only a really nice callback to the best fight in the series up until this point, I will accept no arguments on this, but by framing it as a rematch between rivals, it gives Bell an extra incentive to fight. In addition to being a distraction to let the rest of the Xenos escape, he is also motivated to give his all to win the fight against his past foe. There is a personal element to both fighters in this fight, and that really helps with the investment I have in the fight. The fight ends in a loss for Bell, however, and to me, that sends a clever message. Even though Bell had these protagonist powers, there are things in this world that he is just not ready to face yet. This applies not just to the fight, but also to the situation of the Xenos. Much like this Minotaur, the impossibly complex problem the Xenos face with coexistence with humans just isn't a foe Bell can take on right now. He hasn't exactly lost. Like Asterius said, they are now on 1 win each, dead even until the next match. And the Xenos are back in the dungeon and safe for now. So what Bell needs to do now is to accept that he isn't yet ready, and go train to be the best he can until the next hurdle comes. That's pretty poetic if you ask me. And even if you think I'm reading too much into things, you can't really deny that Asterius standing over Bell and telling him that they will settle their tie in the future isn't frickin' badass. Mans is a gigachad. It's still a little crazy to me that I found so much good to talk about after just one rewatch. Believe me or not, at one point I even thought this season was worse than Season 2. But I did say my opinion on this season was pretty mixed. So let's get into the bad now, shall we? And let me tell you, some of the bad? Ooh boy, gets really bad. Let's start with how Bell goes against Ice this season. Dude, didn't you just say that this was a good thing? I know. Let me cook, alright? While I do think the conflict between Bell and Ice is nicely written here, I am worried about what this implies for the story going forward. We spent all this time in Season 1 setting up this goal for Bell, telling us how his feelings for Ice are directly tied to his physical growth, basically giving us this promise that we will see Bell continue to chase after Ice. But well, as you might know, she was just gone for the most part in Season 2. And in this season, Bell straight up goes against her, for another girl no less. And I'm just left thinking, this conflict is interesting and all, but what does this mean for the story in the future? It slowly feels more and more like the main love interest for Bell isn't Ice anymore. Which would be fine, if not for Bell's protagonist power that makes his EXP gain faster the stronger his feelings are for Ice. In the world of Danmachi, that's the one thing that makes him stand out, his immense speed and his growth. Without it, he would just be like any other adventurer out there. I mean, you could make a plot point about him losing what makes him special, and him needing to deal with it in his own way. but I don't think whoever the writer is for this story is ballsy enough to take away his protagonist's OP power. So what I'm worried about is that his EXP boost would just be a given in the future, with its ties to his feelings for Ice becoming slowly forgotten. Which would be a huge shame, since it would create the divide between romance and action this skill conveniently bridged in the first place. So I guess this is not so much criticism, but more like a concern at the back of my head for the story. But onto some actual criticism. Guess who's back? Back again. It's your favorite, long-ass boring expositions. This time, brought to you by 2 side characters and a comically evil villain. Oh yeah, this time, we're throwing away the weights, the gloves are coming off, we're diving headfirst, deep into exposition station, baby.
Woo! Yeah, baby!
Now, to cut the anime some slack, the concept of the Xenos, like I said, is a decently novel concept. You have to let the audience know what exactly their nature is, how they interact with humans, how they interact with other monsters, etc, etc. But could you really not find some other way to at least convey some of that? Take the plot point about monsters having a birth and rebirth cycle, for example. Instead of having Lead retell his dreams of his past life, oh god, why does his mouth not move when he speaks? Instead of having Lead retell his dreams of his past life and straight up telling us about the last time he lived, then add on Uranos telling Hestia about the birth and rebirth cycle to make it extra obvious. Why not just leave in Winnie's dreams about hurting people? Not completely explaining it to make it ambiguous. Then wait until Belle's fight with Asterius to confirm that they do reincarnate and retain their memories of their past life. In addition to cutting out some boring dialogue, wouldn't that be a much more satisfying revelation? Just imagine watching that and going, oh snap, he's the Minotaur from before. It's a rematch. Wait, doesn't that confirm that these monsters do retain their memories from past lives? Damn, this is crazy! I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but that's how I'd rather it to be. What I won't cut them slack on, however, is the exposition about Dix and the man-made labyrinth. You see, the main plot of this season is definitely about the Xenos and their struggle to find a place where they belong. This whole ordeal about the labyrinth and the Daedalus bloodline is a big side plot that just doesn't fit in with the main one. Don't get me wrong, it's quite fitting that there would be poachers that specifically hunt the Xenos. That part makes sense. But when the only connecting thread between this Dix guy hunting the Xenos and his legacy to build the labyrinth is only, oh, torturing the Xenos makes me feel so much better, you can see where the problem is. When the side plot is hanging by a thin thread like this, it barely matters at all. Just think about it. In this situation, how does his backstory affect the main plot? In the predicament he's in, there's nothing else Belle can do except for beating him in a fight and stopping him. Belle getting to know his backstory does nothing to affect what he needs to do and how he can stop him. At the end of the day, he is just another comically evil guy whose whole personality is I get off to hurting others. And you can basically swap his backstory with any other anime character that has the same personality. That's how meaningless his origins are to the main plot. Naturally, this means that it's really damn hard to care about his seemingly unending spiels about how he's cursed by his own blood, how he loathes Daedalus for that, and an entire freaking history lesson on what happened to Daedalus. It's goddamn insufferable when I know for a fact that it has basically nothing to do with the Xenos, the thing I actually care about. And no, cutting away to Hermes continuing the same exposition does not make it any more tolerable. And this guy loves talking about himself so much that he does the classic thing of standing still and explaining how his ability works. Come on, man! People have literally made skits over this trope. And of course, following that trope, Belle just stands there and listens to this man babble on, even when he's got his back turned on him. Just go in and give him the stabby stabby! It's not that difficult! Sir! Huh? What is it? This isn't good! We set up this comically evil villain for Belle to fight, but now we can't properly show off how much of a good guy he is because nothing he says will affect the villain. What should we do? That is a problem. I know. Give him Talk no Jutsu. Talk no Jutsu? That's right. Make it so that his speech is so invigorating that it overrides the mind scramble curse put on the Xenos. Whoa. That's stupid as hell, yo. I know, right? Yeah, I don't think I need to elaborate much more on why I really don't like the side plot. It's contrived, matters very little in the grand scheme, and just fails to make me care about it. Like I said before, if the audience doesn't care, it probably will come across as boring. And goddamn was this side plot boring as hell. But the main plot isn't without flaws as well. That's right, there's a major, critical flaw with the main plot that possibly heavily limited the potential greatness of this season. And that flaw lies in this little monster girl. Now, don't quite pick up your pitchforks and torches yet. I'm not saying they should have removed the cute Dotoru from the show. In fact, I believe the plot wouldn't work as well without her. But there were some really questionable, sometimes downright horrible decisions they made surrounding this character that just makes me think,
We were on the verge of greatness. We were this close.
over the course of the show, there were a few instances where the bigger picture is pushed aside in place of lazy wish fulfillment. What do I mean by that? See, in episode 5, Bell received news that the Xenos has launched an attack on the town in the dungeon. Bell eventually ends up getting invited by Fels to secretly join the suppression force and investigate, and he agrees to do so. He gathers his resolve, makes his goal clear in his mind. He has to go to where Wine is. This guy went and visited the Xenos village, saw how this whole group of sentient individuals are forced to live in the shadows, and heard about their dreams and aspirations for the future. He experienced all that, but now that the future of all the Xenos are possibly in jeopardy, the main thing on his mind is that one girl among all of the Xenos. And this isn't even the only time this happens. I just don't quite get this writing decision. You have this huge complex issue you've written up for the season, talking about the conflict of two groups of people. But the protagonist just thinks about the girl. If Bell strived to resolve the rift between the humans and Xenos, he would definitely look way more heroic and be much more respected by the audience. But in actuality, while he does want that for the Xenos, it seemed like his focus was put way more heavily on Wine. And of course, Wine does the same. I think she does want to be with humans in general, but she mostly just cries and whines over Bell over and over again. The entire Hestia Familia took you in along with Bell. Show some frickin' respect. I'm not saying this is the definitive wrong decision. I admit that it makes perfect sense that these two would be more attached to each other. But when there's a better alternative, an alternative that would see Bell and Wine, after being introduced to each other's species through the encounter, strive to bring the two peoples together hand in hand and aim for a future of coexistence, I just don't get why they would choose the done to death, saving the damsel in distress wish fulfillment route, instead of that more noble motivation that would have us respect them more. And hell, are you telling me that solving the discrimination built between the two peoples for centuries is not one of the greatest heroic feats one can do? And would make for the best wish fulfillment for people projecting themselves on the protagonist? I don't know about you, but I would want to be someone that's special enough to solve major societal issues. Just saying. And speaking of a damsel in distress, that's another problem I have with Wine's character. Except for that one badass scene I said I appreciated, Wine offers almost no contribution to anything to the other characters in the world. All she does is either act cute, or cry about how she can't be with Belle while doing absolutely nothing about it. Some people might be fine with the character only being cute and nothing else. But for me, I can't get invested at all in the literal baby that needs constant babysitting with nearly no agency at all. At least not in this kind of story. and especially not when the problem presented in this season is not at all lighthearted enough for that kind of casual character. It just slowly gets more frustrating seeing her continuously get in trouble and needing Belle's help, while she does nothing concerning the problem that affects her very own species. When this main character only does a single significant thing for the story of her own accord in episode 11 out of 12, you might be able to see why I would be annoyed by her for most of the season. But I have gone on way too long without mentioning the elephant in the room. Wine's death. This is probably going to be the most controversial part of the video. This is the scene where my current thoughts line up quite accurately to how I felt when I watched it for the first time. This might get you raising your pitchforks already, but I really couldn't care much when she went and died. Like I said just now, she has done practically nothing important for everyone else up until this point, so I couldn't really get emotional over her death with how little investment I have in her character. But hey, this could mean good character motivation for Belle, right? If Wine dies, we could see Belle get affected by emotions we'd never seen before, letting us see a completely different side of him. Watching him deal with those kinds of emotions and him growing from it would be... Does he know? Know what? Wait, Fels, what are you doing? No, wait!
No, 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 no! Wait! Wait!
God damn it! Yep, that's right. Even if I was attached to Wine, all emotional impact I would have gotten from her death would be straight up annihilated immediately, because Fels comes out literal seconds after she dies to resurrect her, not to mention with a spell that has never worked before. She literally did a resurrection any % speedrun and got the world record. She saw Jesus' 72-hour run and said, "Nah, watch this skip," and shaved off 71 hours and 59 minutes. She said, "It's resurrecting time," and resurrected all over the place. They couldn't even bother to leave it as a cliffhanger, for goodness sake. This is by far the scene I have the most problem with, but I don't think I need to elaborate much more on why I think so. It was anticlimactic, and more importantly, makes her death completely pointless. What's the point of her dying if she immediately comes back? Either just have her not die at all, or have her stay dead, at least for a while. I would definitely like to see the scenario where Wine just dies and Belle has to deal with it. But I get it, people might not like seeing their daughter get killed off. In that case, just don't kill her in the first place. To sum up my thoughts on this scene in 4 words.
What was the reason? What was the reason? What was the reason?
This script turned out way longer than I thought it would be. But that makes sense, because I truly am mixed on this season. Like I said, the bad gets really bad, but the good is pretty good. Even after the long time writing the script, I still can't quite be sure on whether the stinky in this season soils it for me. The stuff with Wine is really rough, but in the end, the premise for this season is still really solid. What do you think? If you're in general agreement with me on the points about the good and the bad, was this season a net positive or negative to you? If you don't exactly agree with me on everything, what was it that you didn't agree with me on? And how does that affect your general opinion on the season? Last but not least, how many of you want to crucify me for not liking Wine? Please do tell me your thoughts in the comment section. As usual, like if you liked, dislike if you disliked, and subscribe for more content from me. That's all from me for this video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!